Good morning from this blustery winter, snowy, icy, windy day in here in northern Michigan. It's about 20 degrees and very cold. Yesterday was 73, and I went for a 14-mile bike ride along the water, and it was beautiful. And all the sun was just creating all the bright dopamine hits to my brain, and I loved every second of it. And today, it's a little bit different, but that's what you get in northern Michigan. Anyways, today I just want to chat real quick about the new Fuji X100VI or X100VI, if you will, that Fuji just announced over at their launch party in Japan. And it's an interesting camera because when that first came out, I really didn't have any interest. I'm sorry, when the X100V came out, I didn't have really any interest. It was similar processor to the X-T3 I had. Um, it had a 23 millimeter fixed f2 lens, and I was like, I'm done with having like a little pocket camera. That was the first 38 years of my life, and that's what I used. But I was a professional now. I had moved on to real cameras. So at that time, I had a Fuji X-T3, loved it. It took me a long time to get used to it. I'd come from a Canon, and I'd only ever shot Canon. My dad only ever shot Canon. He bought me my first DSLR. It was a Canon T2i, and it was the first time I ever bought interchangeable lenses, and the first time I ever had a fixed prime lens. A buddy of mine turned me on to the Sigma 30 millimeter, and I just absolutely fell in love with it, and it really got me um, more interested in the world of photography. Well, fast forward a few years later, I was getting a little bit more serious about my craft, and a good friend of mine was shooting on a Fuji, and I'd heard of Fuji's, never really looked into them much. You'd always heard about Canons and Nikons, of course, and Sony had just started kind of coming onto the scene, but Fuji, no, I had no interest. But I started seeing the photos that he was taking, and I was just blown away, and I was like, oh my god, that is an amazing camera. Um, he had an XT2 at the time. Went online, found a used XT2. Took me a while to get used to it, like I said, but eventually just absolutely fell in love with it. Um, Bought a used XT3 and really shot on that for the better part of probably 4 or 5 years. The XT4, the XT5 came out, a little bit improved sensors, um, but I stuck with the XT3. It fit everything that I needed, and in fact, I have one right here, and it's got all these funky dials and it looks retro, and um, when people see it out in the wild, they're always like, "Oh, that's a cool looking camera." And at first I was very intimidated because I'd come from the world of just being able to like um, everything was menu driven through the screen, right? So I'd look at my camera, but after a while, getting used to the Fuji, everything just became natural. You got your aperture is usually fixed on the actual lens itself. Um, you got your ISO dial, you got your shutter speed dial, you got your exposure compensation dial, and I got to the point where I could just like shoot, and I knew where my buttons were, and I didn't have to look at the screen to adjust, and it just became second nature, and I eventually fell in love with that. Um, but after a while, there's a lot of photographers that I follow on Instagram, and I just really started falling in love with all these images and videos I was seeing from Sony cameras, and that was right around the time the Sony A7 III came out, and it kind of was a big deal in the industry. It took amazing video, uh, took amazing stills. It was really like the first pro level at a consumer price hybrid shooter that they call it. And I'm not a professional photographer or videographer by any means. It's just a hobby of mine. Um, I actually rarely get paid to do either. Every once in a while, I do get paid to do it, but it's not really, what I'm doing it for my career. But, um, anyways, I eventually decided one day that I was going to sell all my Fuji gear. I had a ton of lenses. I had the 16 millimeter 1.4, the 23 millimeter 1.4, the 56 millimeter 1.4, the 50 to 140 f2 2.8. Had the 35 millimeter f2, and I packed it all up and sent it off. Got a check back, and I bought the Sony A7 III. And I love the Sony A7 III. I did eventually upgrade to the A7 IV, but those Sony cameras are amazing. I started getting into portrait photography, and it's they're amazing cameras. Everyone has their different styles and preferences and the needs that they have for their own shooting, and I absolutely love the Sony systems. Their lenses are a little expensive if you go with the G Master line, but I ended up picking up a little bit cheaper Sigma lenses to get started with the Sony, and still have the A7 IV. Absolutely love it. When I took some photos of my kids downhill skiing in their race over this winter, and it's been amazing. It takes unbelievable shots. The autofocus is out of the world. I mean, there's so many. There are very few shots that aren't in focus, right? But I started getting that itch, and I really miss the Fuji camera, and so I ended up picking up this. I mean, this is like brand new. It had less than 200 shots on its shutter. The body is flawless. It looks brand new. And it came with this 23 millimeter f2 lens, which is a great small compact all around lens. 35 millimeter equivalent on a full frame. And it was right around the time when the X100V was going absolutely crazy all over TikTok, and it became like the hype camera of the last couple of years. You couldn't find one, and if you could find one, they're sometimes going for 2 times the original retail price. And when that came out, I really didn't have any interest in having like a small pocket camera, if you will. It was a small fixed f2 lens, 23 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent full frame. But I was just like, I had the small camera. That's what I had when I was in high school and college, and it was just like a small compact camera that you carried around because smartphones didn't take great photos then. And so that's what it reminded me of, and I was just like, I have these amazing cameras now, these amazing lenses. Why would I want that, right? But it blew up. Everyone wanted one, and I still wasn't really interested, but I was like very fascinated, intrigued that it got so much hype and everyone wanted one. And so when I picked this guy up, the X-T3, or reacquired one, it was basically the same guts as the X100V. It had the 26 megapixel X-trans sensor. At that time, I had the 23 millimeter f2, same lens as on the X100V, and I was like, you know what? I got this for a fraction of what these X100Vs are going for. Same sensor, same lens, same quality, and I was fine with that, right? So a couple days ago, Fuji announced at their event in Japan that they just are about to launch the next camera line in the X100 series, which is the X100VI or X100VI, and it got me thinking a little bit. As I have these bigger cameras, the Sony cameras are great, but it's bulky compared to this Fuji that I have, and the lenses are humongous. My Sigma 85 millimeter, isn't as big as like say back in the DSLR days, but it's still big compared to what I had with the Fuji line. And but anyways, the X100VI now has a 40 megapixel sensor, same that's in the X-T5, Still has the 23 millimeter f2 lens, but it's an upgraded version, and it just takes amazing video and stills. Has built-in ND filters, but now has in bodies image stabilization, IBIS, and I really want one. And so I've been thinking about, all right, which camera do I sell? I have way too many cameras, and I just find that for my everyday use, I have this like amazing Sony laying around, and I still like more often than not reach for my X-T3 when I go for a walk with the family or take pictures of my dog. That's what I want, right? So, anyways, very intrigued by the X100VI, and I have a feeling it's gonna end up in my camera repertoire here. The only problem is it's apparently the most pre-ordered camera of all time, just because of the hype that the previous camera got, and everyone knew this was coming down the line. Fuji had kind of hinted to the fact that the next version was about to come out. They invited and flew all my favorite YouTube and Instagram photographers, which I'm so jealous because they got to spend a week in Japan using this camera for the official announcement. And of course, I've been watching all the YouTube videos of them talking about what an amazing camera is. So, anyways, really excited to see more and more photos and videos that are coming out of this camera now that they're starting to ship out. Apparently, some suppliers are starting to get their initial allotment, and just really stoked to see the quality of images and video that's going to come out of this camera. And have a feeling after all these years, might sell my X-T3. I don't know. I might keep it just because it's like my first real camera that really got me into photography more than just at a hobby level. So I might have to keep this just for nostalgia's sake, but yeah, I don't know. I really am very interested in that the new X100 series, and who knows, maybe I'll have some video on that in the upcoming videos here. All right, peace.